This weekend, we are finally back to the Chicago street race, and I think a lot rides on this weekend in the present and the future, and I don't think fans necessarily look at it as much as they probably should. And I think the full picture really starts, of course, with last year. Last year, this was the most controversial race of 2023 before the track was even constructed. Before a lap was even put on this track in Xfinity or Cup, everybody had an opinion on it, myself included. The change itself to Chicago from Road America wouldn't help either, at least with the local rivalry. See, Chicago and Wisconsin fans are definitely on opposite ends. Not going to have many Bears fans hanging out with Packer fans, Cubs fans with Brewers fans, you name it. And that alone was going to make it at least bad for that Road America base that came out in force for 2 years. City officials also made it difficult in the lead up as well. You see, this was clearly a political move by Mayor Lightfoot, and in her last-ditch efforts to bring support to her re-election bid when it came to being the mayor of Chicago, well, it failed, but it was divisive. It put NASCAR in the middle of a political battle that, in all honesty, it should not have been in the middle of, even if it was used as a pawn. And with that, too, you add in the weekend itself. A damn monsoon came in, cutting the Xfinity race before halfway and cutting the Cup race to be shortened by 25 of its 100 laps. This rain, as someone who was an Illinois native for 23 years, I can tell you was out of the ordinary. It was a once-in-a-lifetime kind of storm, and with that, NASCAR had a once-in-a-lifetime kind of event. It turned into a huge success. The racing managed to be good enough to keep people entertained. There may be many that it might not have been the cup of tea of, but ultimately it seemed to capture a lot of the nation when it came to interest, especially in the local areas. I was up in the local area around that time to see family, and one thing I noticed anecdotally was the amount of people who never cared about NASCAR before, no matter how much I talked about it growing up, who were asking me about the Chicago street race, who had questions of who to root for or what the racing would be like, or similar to the questions that many of the fans and many of the locals were giving last year, would they run into the buildings? That was something people wondered. So this was something that really started to reach out. And then also you had Shane Van Gisbergen with the ultimate upset win in NASCAR history, winning his first Cup race and his first overall NASCAR start, something that wasn't really normal ever since the early 1950s. And then with that as well, you had the numbers, and the numbers were great for NASCAR and everybody who wants street races in NASCAR, as well as everybody who wants to stay in Chicago for a couple more years. 4.8 million viewers, nearly 5 million on average, were watching this race. The most watched NASCAR race on Big NBC since 2017 at the Brickyard. Also, on top of that, they peaked at almost 5.5 million viewers by the time SVG crossed the line. Chicago finished with a 9.3 rating, meaning 9.3% of all televisions in Chicago were watching NASCAR. Yeah, nearly 1 out of 10 viewers in the city of Chicago were watching NASCAR. It's a big deal, and it led to a big bump in the summer TV ratings as well. For about 6 or 7 weeks, ratings were generally up over that time in what overall, because of bad racing, different trends, and Chase Elliott being out, was viewed as ultimately a failure in the ratings department, one of the all-time low seasons in NASCAR's history recording this. So this gave a big bump to NASCAR overall, especially at races like Pocono that came right after it. Now this year, it's gonna be a bit different, obviously. I don't think the monsoon's going to roll through, and it does seem like the city overall has become a bit more receptive to it. At least the citizens have become more receptive to it. NASCAR also does have to pay a bit more this year, but it has been less of a stress when it comes to those citizens. There's a baseline now, and how to run it. And there's also a baseline on what can be done and can't be done surrounding it. NASCAR is outreaching more into the local community, and the preliminary outlook does look pretty good, all things considered, for channels the races are on, as well as everything else around it. But why is this year so big? Because you could say that about every year. You could say it's the biggest race in X amount of years, or it's the biggest opportunity since blankety blank. But why is 2024 at Chicago such a big deal? Well, for one, it's for next year, 2025, year 3 of the deal. The city of Chicago signed for the July 4th weekend, but in this deal, the first 2 years were guaranteed with a possible opt-in for 2025 or opt-out. The city also has indicated that they would decide after this race weekend whether or not they want to re-up. Now, it also is very important to note that while the city has warmed up to it, and while a lot of politicians have and have been proven wrong about the problems that they made up or brought up last year, the mayor of Chicago that replaced the one that signed in this deal did run on getting rid of this race and has been very critical of it. So that's something to play in mind as well. To me, it all hinges on ratings and in-person attendance. I'll give you an example. The Los Angeles Coliseum for the Clash had about 4.3 million viewers in 2022, a very big audience for modern NASCAR. That went down to 3.6.5 million in 2023, about a 14-15% drop overall in television viewership. But that's expected. A lot of big events get a big audience in year 1 and don't gain. Though, you had, for instance, the North Wilkesboro All-Star Race. While having Kyle Larson's storyline add into it, year over year, it went up in 2024. So I think anything from a small increase to, say, a 15% decrease is okay for a year 2 and something still to build upon as long as it's not a complete disaster, similar to what the 2023 Clash at the Coliseum was. So with that too, it also hovers, say, around 4 million. I think we're good to go. If it's within 200,000 either way, NASCAR should be fine. But if people don't show up in person and you get well under the estimated marks that this race should hit, well, then you're going to have some problems. But why else is this year big? Well, it's for where it's at, obviously, the Chicago market. Can they come back for 2025 with a success? Yes, and they can have a success after that as well. But each year needs to earn a bit more of the Chicago market overall. You can't lose that 9.3% that came in the first year. You got to gain in some ways on it. You got to keep NASCAR in a very crowded sports and entertainment market. This also can help those, though, that want the Chicagoland Speedway brought back for this kind of reason, for the local support and the local audience growing instead of just basically wanting people to come in from other states to support you. The Chicagoland Speedway, since about 2014, had been failing when it came to bringing in viewers, whether it be on TV or in person. They changed dates multiple times. They changed different approaches. Nothing seemed to work. And by 2019, they were limping along to the finish line. There was nothing really special about this race. But with the Chicago and Chicagoland market having a real effect put into it when it comes to marketing and actual effort, that could have a real and stable baseline of success for the future. Place holds about 50,000 seated capacity. And say you bring in 10,000 more people, that is going to make a huge difference. The racing also can push this over the edge one way or another for entertainment. The next gen is great at 1.5 miles, since Chicagoland's sister track of Kansas is the best on the schedule. And on top of that, Chicagoland has an old surface. It is worn down, it's rough on tires, and it just has all the ingredients for a great next-gen race. And the condition the track is in as well is very good. It held events as recently as last September. Also, this is big for those who want street races on the schedule long term. Sustained success can attract new markets to NASCAR, maybe even start a bit of a bidding war so NASCAR doesn't have to pay a large hefty amount to get into a city. There's already been cities like Denver and Pittsburgh who have actually shown interest in NASCAR coming to town. This would both bring NASCAR to big markets, new markets as well, and more metropolitan city markets, while they don't have to have the problems they had in Chicago. And on top of that, it could eat into the market share of city races and street races that their number one competitor at this moment, F1, is excelling at and has excelled at for a long time. In my opinion, this year is huge for NASCAR. I think they just need a stable year. They don't need a historic rainstorm coming in to spice it up. They don't need a once-in-a-lifetime victory. They just need solid racing and a solid storyline leaving, and they should be good for so many different points. But with that, I want to know what you think. What are your opinions on the Chicago street race? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you put up with it maybe? Let me know down in the comments below. While you're at it, leave a like on this video. Share this video and subscribe to this channel for more great and fun NASCAR content. Thank you so much to all my channel members for continued support. And until next time, have a good one.